Hi guys, Rekus here with a new video, and today we want to have a look at the tree of origin of Sun Devourer Eos. This one has been requested a lot of times by you guys, and I surely want to have a look at it. It's one of the cooler heroes in the game, one of the stronger heroes in the game even. Sometimes a bit overlooked, because damage over time always seems a little bit lower than direct damage, but she does a lot of damage, I can tell you guys. Definitely a lot of damage, and some good synergy with Phoenix even. So let's have a look at her skills. Active skill first. Active skill is now deal 1400% of attack damage to all enemies. This was actually 1200% of attack damage before. We are a bit lower than 20% on this buff, which is a bit strange. We have seen mostly 20% or more on the other heroes, but it's still a decent buff, and we deal the damage to all enemies, so that's still a pretty powerful active skill actually. And when we first released the active skill during the battle, we burn the target and deal an extra damage equal to 12% of the target's max HP. That's something people miss a lot of times. Eos only burns with her active the first time she does it. Every consecutive time doesn't burn. So, looks like it. The skill effect looks like it. It's like the huge burning explosion that she hits the enemy with. Especially if you have the skin equipped. But actually only the first active you do in a fight burns the enemy. And we burn them for 12% of their max HP, which was 10% before. And like on other heroes, they have kept the cap. So it's still 1500% of Sun Devourer Eos attack, which doesn't make a difference against low HP enemies like in PvP. But if you fight a high HP boss or something and you used to hit the cap on this with a 10%, the 12% won't actually be more damage, while in PvP or against lower HP enemies, it of course is a buff and will be more damage, so keep that in mind. Also, with our first use of the active skill in a fight, we summon an Everlasting Sun 3. The Everlasting Sun 3 received a few buffs as well. We also see the 12% of attack damage burn here, with the 1500% of Sun Devourer Eos attack cap that will be inflicted at the end of each round, and this one also burns the target. We have the same cap here, the same problem as above, but still in PvP, very nice. And we have a 40% chance to inflict Dazzle. This wasn't actually strengthened in any form by the first upgrade here, so it's the same as before. And when we already have an Everlasting Sun 3 on the battlefield, which means we already did an active, and we do the active again, there will be instead Divine Retribution 3 inflicted on all enemies. Divine Retribution 3 was buffed as well, was formerly 800% of attack damage and is now 900% of attack damage. So also a little bit smaller buff, but Divine Retribution is still pretty strong and a very nice addition. What I noticed with this though, something I still find interesting, people sometimes think that Star Devourer Eos or Sun Devourer Eos can't crit with her active skill. Because here at Divine Retribution 3 it says, this effect does not land a critical hit and its damage is fixed, which cannot be reduced or increased by skill effects or attributes. And some people think that this is the case for all of the active, which isn't true. Only the Divine Retribution 3 can't crit. This part here, the 1400% of attack damage, can of course crit. So crit chance, crit damage, still viable imprints for Eos. We have some more descriptions here, but nothing really changed there, so we won't go over them. Let's look at the sublimations for the active skill. We first have the all damage dealt increase by 12%, which is nice. All damage is definitely the right attribute for Eos, considering we have dot on here and we have normal attack damage, so this helps. Divine Retribution of course won't be affected, as this would be an attribute and this won't buff Divine Retribution. Then we have Deep Sublimation, increases the duration of burn effect provided by Eternal Sun and Everlasting Sun to 8 rounds. Usually this would be quite nice. In recent times we have seen a lot of Purify though. Most of the enemies have the regular all Purify, purifying 1 attack or 1 dot, 1 attribute reduction per turn. So the effect of this will likely be a bit smaller. The nice part about this is though, this won't run out in any reasonable amount of time in a fight, so the enemy will likely have to purify it. And this is good actually, because if the enemy has to purify this effect instead of it running out, then his purify is used for that, and he can't use it to purify like a control effect or something like that. At one point he will purify this burn effect, and till then it will deal damage. So I see that as a good buff, though against most bosses it has a smaller effect than you might think. Then we have the last one. At the end of each round, Everlasting Sun Additional increases the burn damage taken by all enemies by 10% for 6 rounds. So this actually heightens our dot, which is quite nice. Can use that. But beyond that, this might actually be another attribute reduction or a skill effect. We will see about that, and something the enemy has to purify as well. But it's increasing the burn damage taken by the enemy for 10% for 6 rounds. So we get like 60% more burn damage after those 6 rounds. It's actually a huge chunk of damage. And considering it's a debuff for the enemy, it should not be inflicted. It should not respect the cap here, the 1500% of Sun Devourer's Eos attack. So it should basically take the damage that is coming from Eos, from the dot, that of course respects the cap, and then add basically 60% on it, which is a lot. So that's basically a huge amount of damage for long fights. Quite great at that, I have to say. And will definitely help in longer PvE fights, of course not in shorter ones. Then we have the basic attack, Scorched Sight. Scorched Sight is a pretty strong attack, has been before. And it's now 1200% of attack damage against the front row. It was 1000% of attack damage before, so we see the 20% buff here. We burn the enemy, and we deal an extra damage of 12% of the target's max HP, like with the active. For 2 rounds here, and we have the 1500% of attack cap here as well. And this was also at 10% of target's max HP before, and now it's 20% higher. Restore the self HP equal to 18% of our max HP for 2 rounds. This was 15% before, so also pretty good buff, also the around 20% buff. And this actually heals quite a lot, 36% of max HP in total. So something I quite like, that she has some restorative capabilities. I like heroes that can do that by themselves and are not reliant on the healer to heal. So let's look at the sublimations. All damage dealt buff by 12% again. It's quite good, the same as with the active. Then we have the increased duration of the burn effect. I said something about that before. Making this longer will help in that the boss has to purify it himself, and otherwise it will take longer to run out and has more possibilities to do damage. This is of course only 3 rounds, so might run out by itself, but still 3 rounds can be quite long in a fight. In PvE, the same as in PvP, and PvP even more so. 3 rounds are a long time, and a fight can end in that time, so that's also quite a decent buff. Then we have additionally reduces the target's damage reduction by 15% for 2 rounds. That's really nice. For once we have here a attribute reduction here. So again, a debuff the boss has to purify. And on the other hand, this really heightens the damage the enemy takes. 15% less damage reduction is a lot more damage we can inflict. And so I really like this one. And in general, I think a lot of the kits of a lot of the sublimations of Sun Devourer Eos actually aim towards distorting Purify and making Purify miss important effects. So like if you have a Sun Devourer Eos there and you have a Starving Jawa, let's say, and the Starving Jawa CCs, usually the boss might purify this, but now if you have a Sun Devourer Eos in the team, there are like 5 effects on the enemy, and he won't really aim for the right one at all times. So you have a good chance that your CC lasts longer or your attribute reduction lasts longer, because the boss can only purify one thing at a time. So that's really also quite nice thing about this, and we will see similar things later down the tree. So next one, first real passive skill beyond the basic, is the life cycle. Life cycle, whenever an enemy dies, increases self all damage dealt by 12%, was 10% before for 8 rounds, that stayed the same, and energy by 50, which also stayed the same. And whenever an ally dies, increases self-damage reduction by 8%, this was 6% before for 8 rounds, and control immunity by 10% for 8 rounds. The control immunity hasn't changed. This has always been a very strong ability in general. You could say that as soon as one enemy dies, your Sandivar Eos would basically start cleaning the enemy up, gaining the 50 energy, maybe if more enemies die, even 100 energy. Can really be a game changer, and the increased all damage dealt on top on everything else could easily rip apart an enemy team. So this is quite a strong ability, especially in PvP, but also in PvE. If you think of Void Campaign, there are like six enemies on the field as well. If one of them dies and your Eos is on the field, she will drastically increase her damage, and this will be quite strong as well. So let's have a look at the sublimations. First sublimation, pretty standard, HP and attack buff. Then we have the deep sublimation. When it is triggered, additionally restores self HP equal to 6% of max HP. Okay, I mean, that's an alright buff. It's nothing too impressive. Restoring HP will be a nice thing in most cases, and it's not too much though. I mean, it's like 6% of max HP, okay. If you have as a main house owner, that can be a decent chunk, but I mean, the most this can heal if the enemy doesn't run a carry would be 36% of the enemy team, and it also triggers when an ally dies. That's another 30%, that's like 66% of your health. Okay, like, yeah, that's like one Verrucane Vesa heal. So not that impressive, but still nice. It's some HP restoration. Then let's have a look at last one. Increases self all damage dealt till the battle ends. I mean, it's an alright skill. Nothing too impressive. I would have maybe even liked the all damage reduction more. So the all damage reduction that you get, or the damage reduction that you get when an ally dies, because that would have actually helped in Sealand. In Sealand, you have like, the tactic was to use Michelles that die and give your either your S model or your Sun Devourer Eos a buff, in this case damage reduction. But especially with Sun Devourer Eos, the fights often lasted 15 rounds. And in the middle of the fight, those buffs that you acquired at the beginning from the Michelles dying would actually run out, and your Sun Devourer would start taking way more damage. And having the damage reduction that you get there last till the end of the fight would have actually been pretty great. But having the all damage dealt till the end of the fight can be quite nice too. Just won't help too much for Sealand, I would imagine, as it takes quite some time to get an enemy down there, and at this point the fight most likely not last another 8 rounds, so not too impressive, I have to say. The last one now, we have the Undying Gloomy Sun. What a name. When self dies, inflicts energy oscillation 3 on all enemies and summon Engulfing Sun 3 on enemy's battlefield. And this is actually the passive that I've gotten the most questions about. A lot of people read this skill and the sublimations that it has and are very confused, and we will go over why. So the first part of it, we have energy oscillation 3, and we actually have that explained down here. It's a skill effect for every 1 energy the target has. It deals 7% of attack damage, was 6% before, so rather minor buff at that, but okay. And we have Engulfing Sun. It's a skill effect, cannot be stacked, and at the end of each round inflicts Energy Oscillation 3 on all enemies with a 40% chance to reduce the target's energy by 60, which was 50 before. This is a very, very, very strong skill. Like imagine in PvE and you are fighting a Garuda, like in Void Vortex for example. And Garuda really is only worth something if she can do an active skill. And you lock her down, you get like a CC on her, maybe you have like 2 heroes surviving, let's say we have 2 heroes surviving. And this Garuda is there and is CC'd all the time and you attack her, but it takes some time to get her down. You have like no more crit damage buffs from Rogue or something and you want to take her down. And with that she will likely not get to an active skill because even if she breaks out, her energy will be reduced like every second turn by 60. So the chance of the enemy actually getting a decent energy feed or getting an active off is drastically reduced. And in a fight this can be really quite great as well. It's like a finisher for the enemy, or even in PvP, if she dies there, that can be quite disruptive to an energy feed team, because there will be rounds when the energy feed team of the enemy won't get an actives, and at that point energy feed teams often tend to die. The other point, energy oscillation, is just some nice damage, can be okay-ish damage, not too impressive though. One thing you have to understand though, when Self dies, we have 2 kinds of suns. The first one is summoned by the active skill, and it's the Everlasting Sun. This is the one that does the huge damage numbers. Basically this with the burn, with the 12% HP burn. And this sun that does the huge damage is actually replaced by this sun that does significantly lower damage, but with the added advantage of reducing the target's energy. So you kind of have to see if you want a high damage sun or a low damage sun. How long is your Sun Devourer EOS gonna last? Do you want maybe run a crown on the Sun Devourer EOS to make her last longer, to have more from the Everlasting Sun, or maybe run an energy artifact, burst the enemy a few times, let her die, and then get the Engulfing Sun with the energy drain. Can be good as well. Something that you can employ and keep in your tactic. Let's have a look at the sublimations. First one's very basic, HP attack buff. Then we have, that's the one people ask me a lot about. When Self dies, there's a 33% chance to strengthen energy oscillation and transfer it into Outburst of Magic. Not only is this wording of this skill confusing, it is actually also quite confusing because unlike all the other skills before, like here where we have all the explanation, there's no explanation for this. We know energy oscillation. Energy oscillation is here. That's this one. For every energy the target has, deals 7% of attack damage. And this is the same. Will be the same here. And we transfer it into Outburst of Magic. And then the question was, of course, what is Outburst of Magic? And if you click here, you won't find it on that hero. No chance. There's no Outburst of Magic anywhere here, and we can't find any explanation. To find out what Outburst of Magic actually is, we have to leave the Transcendence faction and not even go to the Light faction. It's not even the Light faction where you would find the regular EOS. No, it's the Dark faction, and we go to Carry, and then we go to Carry's basic attack. And Carry's basic attack has a skill effect, and that is actually called Outburst of Magic. And it's kind of ridiculous, by the way, that the developer thought that it was a nice way to describe it, to use the name of a skill effect from Carry. And the difference is basically it's the same for every 1 point of energy target has. It will receive 6% of attack damage, was 7% in our case. And the extra part is, and its energy bar will be zeroed. And that is the part that basically makes Outburst of Magic different to energy oscillation. That's the main difference. So, what do we have here now? We have basically a 33% chance that in the turn that Sun Devourer EOS dies, we will not inflict energy oscillation with our Engulfing Sun, but Outburst of Magic. So we will zero the energy bar of every enemy. 33% chance for that. And the question we had when we discussed this was, How often does this happen? Because when self dies, there is a 30% chance to strengthen the energy oscillation and transfer it into Outburst of Magic. Might as well mean it gets changed forever. Like every turn, it's Outburst of Magic. But that will be pretty much OP. Imagine the enemy every turn gets 0 energy. 0 energy at the end of each turn, will never do an active skill again. Basically done doing active skills, no active skill for the enemy, and we don't think they did that. We don't think they did that. Basically, what I first described, in the turn that Eos dies, 33% chance to strengthen energy oscillation and transfer it into Outburst of Magic. And this is still a super strong skill. You just wipe the energy out from every enemy on the field. This is just great. It's a great skill and one of the strongest sublimations heroes can get. Basically, really one of the strongest sublimations we saw on all the heroes we reviewed yet. So that's really a good one. And if you have Eos and run her maybe as a main homeowner, you should consider getting that. On to the last one. At the end of each round, Engulfing Sun additionally reduces the effect of being healed for all enemies by 15% for 2 rounds. It's okay. It's decent heal effect reduction. 2 rounds is not that long. 30% heal reduction is not that much. For PvE, though, we again have the advantage of screwing with the aim of the enemy's Purify. So that's quite nice. Having the enemy in PvE and PvP at that heal a little bit less is still something that I would consider good. Though not every enemy team you face in PvE will have a healer. In PvP that's a little bit different. Most people still run Ferrokin Vesa, so having the enemy heal less could be quite helpful there. Then we will go over to the core. The core is a bit of a strange one. It basically revolves around Everlasting Sun and Engulfing Sun, and we have talked about both of these suns. The first one being the Everlasting Sun. The Everlasting Sun is the sun when Eos is alive and has done an active skill. Every time this triggers, you additionally increase all allies' all damage reduction by 5% for 1 round and clears 1 random attribute reduction effect. I mean, this is okay-ish. 5% all damage reduction. I mean, would you use a core for 5% all damage reduction? There are just more impactful cores. 5% all damage reduction will be barely noticeable. You throw Magic Fairy Freya on the field and you basically have that, and much more. And the 1 random attribute reduction that gets removed, I mean, it has a reason we use Control Purify most of the time and not Attribute Reduction Purify. Most of the time, attribute reductions just aren't that impactful that you would want to use a core slot to remove them. You live with most of those that are thrown against you in PvP, and in PvE it can be a different thing, of course. Some teams in Void Campaign are designed around throwing attribute reductions at you, and of course in that case you need attribute reduction purify, but you still won't need that core. So the first part, in my opinion, is pretty trash. Then we come to the second part. When Engulfing Sun is triggered, additionally increases all allies all damage dealt by 5% for 1 round with a 20% chance to obtain 30 energy. And this is a lot stronger in my opinion. The all damage dealt by 5%, okay, we take it, but it's the same as 5% all damage reduction at that. Maybe even less impactful. It's not really a whole lot. The 5% all damage reduction would even be more valuable, I think. But we have the 20% chance to obtain 30 energy. So basically, at that point, we will have 5 heroes on the field, as of course Sun Devourer Eos has to be dead for Engulfing Sun to be active. And so basically, we'll feed 30 energy to 1 hero every turn. 20% chance, of course. We will that we have to feed energy. We could at the max feed 150 energy to our team if we hit the 20% chance 5 times. We will hit it 1 time on average, so 30 energy for 1 hero. This is pretty good. It's a pretty nice addition to an energy feed, and this is the strong part of the core, definitely. Of course, we're looking at core liberation level 3 here, so that's basically the core you would have when this is really noble and you have no other noble cores on the field. If you look at the max core, the core liberation level 8, we will have a 10% all damage reduction, which is of course a way nicer value, and the 10% all damage dealt, it is okay-ish, but not that great, and the chance to obtain 30 energy goes up from 20 to 30%, which is not that much of a great increase in my opinion, considering the stats that you add are basically getting doubled. It's not the strongest core in my opinion. We have seen stronger cores on like SFX, that is a nice core, actually have that one. Now we'll maybe do some testing with it soon. And the Starwing Jara core pre-nerf, some people say was fixed. If you actually check out my video, there was a pin post below it that from the day I made the review said that this core is bugged and will likely get fixed at one point. So was right about that. Still a decent core though, with a nice energy feed, maybe even better than this one. So other cores are better, I wouldn't recommend going for this. The sublimations of course are pretty nice. Is this the first hero you want to go for? Likely not, but it has its uses. So EOS is basically the Aspen Dungeon hero. The Aspen Dungeon hero if you want to deal with 4 enemy teams, because as we've seen, every time an enemy dies, she gets 12% all damage dealt, and much more important, she gets 50 energy. So if she does a big active skill, wipes the entire enemy team consisting of 4 enemies, you get 200 energy back and can basically do the same on the next turn. The only thing that can actually screw with her is either not doing enough damage to kill the enemy, which is combated by a lot of things here, like the higher percents on the active skill, increased all damage dealt, and so on. And the other thing being Russell, of course, which we can only really combat with an S tier EOS. But if you don't use her against a Russell, she can pretty much wipe a lot. And this is of course something that gets infinitely better with all the buffs we get here, and if you upgrade her tree, she gets faster as well, so the enemy can't outspeed her, which is also super great, making EOS one of the best heroes, if not the best hero for Aspen Dungeon. So that's something to keep in mind. In general, though, you will have to adjust your heroes to the game state you are in. If you want to do Void campaign, Starwing Jara will still be the best. For Vortex, you can go with SFX. You can really go with a lot of stuff for Vortex nowadays. And if you are early game, maybe do some SFX. SFX is always good. Still a great hero. People underestimate her. So, in total, pretty great tree. Not like the best we have seen. Best in my opinion is still Starwing Jara. Had got the best tree buffs in my opinion, but still a decent one. And if you have tried her out, write in the comments. Let me know how you think she is, and we will see us in the next one.